On today's Star Wars Legends lore video, we discuss the disturbing secrets of Jabba's palace. Jabba's palace is one of the most famous locations in the original Star Wars trilogy, and one of my favorites. However, there's a lot we don't see in Return of the Jedi. It has a long, interesting history, going back almost 1,000 years. The palace, which was actually originally a monastery, was built by the monks of the Bomar Order. It was built far into the Dune Sea to avoid the attention of others on the planet, and it was built on Tatooine to avoid attention from others within the galaxy. Jabba, after discovering the palace, would eventually move in, valuing its isolation as did the Bomar monks, and making it his headquarters. Even after Jabba's death, and despite constant intrusions by burglars, former members of Jabba's posse, and other Hutts, the Bomar monks would remain, once again, the sole inhabitants of their monastery. Who, however, were the mysterious group known as the Bomar monks? In my opinion, the two best sources of lore in this area are Darksaber, which is the second book of the Callista trilogy, and the Brain Spiders, which is part of the Galaxy of Fear series. In Darksaber, we get the following quote: "I'm not sure anyone pretends to understand the Bomar Order," Luke answered. "From what I've heard, when they reach their greatest state of enlightenment, each monk undergoes some kind of surgery that removes his brain and places it in a life support jar. It keeps them from being distracted by physical diversions, leaving them to ponder the great mysteries." Luke is actually pretty much spot on. The monks generally focus on cutting themselves off from the physical world. Once they've achieved the appropriate level of division, other monks would help them remove their brain and put it into a jar. Jabba's palace throughout its history had both new, full-bodied monks and the decraniated enlightened ones. Once in their new form, basically a brain in a vat, Bomar monks mostly spent their time thinking about the universe and recording their thoughts in the great room of the enlightened. When they needed to move about, they would use BT-16 perimeter droids.
You seen that new BT-16?
Notably, of course, you can see one of these during Return of the Jedi. Is this really disturbing though? Most Bomar monks were at peace with the transformation and actually yearned for it. When done consensually, the whole thing is certainly a bit weird and creepy, but not exactly disturbing. However, the removal of brains through the Bomar transformation was often done against the will of living beings. Again, in Darksaber, we learn of Jabba's rival Mazor. I've got a few fun quotes about him. "The thing that emerged was neither entirely a droid nor entirely alive, a set of sharp mechanical legs moving, staggering, as if with poor muscular control. And slung under the legs, where the bloated body of a spider would have been, hung a spherical jar filled with clear fluid that bubbled and gurgled, pulsing life support into the convoluted, spongy form of a human brain." This is Mazor, who explains that after losing a confrontation with Jabba, his brain was removed and placed into a vat. He says that it took his brain a year to adjust to the new circumstances and to stop continually screaming. Jabba, of course, found this all very funny, so he kept Mazor around the palace as somewhat of a joke. The removal of a brain and its placement into a vat is generally only tolerable by the Bomar monks because they spend their entire lives preparing. If the transformation is done to a being who has not successfully removed their connection to the physical world, terrible side effects occur, including this brain screaming, which Mazor described, and just a general absolute sense of horror and dread. Mazor does describe that the monks do whatever they can, even after the transformation, to try to help people adapt to their new scenario, but it's still certainly not easy. Bib Fortuna also had, well, some interesting interactions with the monks. We learn in his story from Tales of Jabba's Palace that, while alive, he wanted to work with the monks in order to initiate a coup against the Hutt. Despite that, he could not help but be totally disgusted by the spider brains. On one occasion, he uses Bomar surgeons to quote-unquote save one of his friends from death by stealing his brain, and there we learn that the Bomar monks are not only capable of removing a brain, but also transporting it into a different body. Bib's plan was actually to put his friend Nat's brain into the body of Han Solo, which would have been interesting to say the least. There was some difficulty, however, because Nat was going insane due to the lack of a body and screaming non-stop. The monks were actually worried that he was going to die. The idea of brains being switched between bodies is also examined in the Galaxy Galaxy of Fear book, which I mentioned earlier. Later, the monks turn on Bib and actually force him to undergo enlightenment as well. It seems like with the death of Jabba, this is actually a practice that became more and more common. Criminals, smugglers, and the like who entered the palace would achieve enlightenment against their will, and the ranks of the Bomar monks would continue to increase. And that is the disturbing backstory of Jabba's palace. What do you guys think? How would you feel about becoming a brain in a jar? Let me know all of that and more down in the comment section. If you haven't already, I highly recommend that you read not only Bib's story, but all of the stories from the Tales of Jabba's Palace book. They're a lot of fun, as are the other Tales books. Anyways, until next time guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.